website. You don't need to bribe any official. It's freely accessible. You know who doesn't deliver and who has delivered, by which date. Every 5 days, there's an update on the website of the presidency. And this project falls directly under the President of the Republic of South Africa. I thank you all. Thanks, Mr.
Give him another clap, please. I think one major running lesson, lock them in a room. Tell your neighbor, lock them in a room. I think that's a good. Our next speaker on the topic infrastructure and capital investment opportunities in Kenya will be by our brother John Musafiri, who is a director of Alpha Group. And those of you who have eaten a bit of salt like myself are aware that he was once commissioner in Kenya, Commissioner General, Kenya Revenue Authority. So I'm sure in terms of which tax to remove, he can give us a hint. John, welcome. And as John takes the floor, I'll request the following panelists to join us on the high table. John Omingo, Dr. Eric Karigura, and the PS if he is back. Thank you.
On a PS, the CEO, all protocols observed this afternoon, to speak very about the investment in maritime sector. And the topic is very wide, but I'll just restrict myself to just a few examples of the potential that we have in Kenya for those who want to invest in the maritime sector. That is just a snapshot of what we are talking about. This is Kenya we're talking about and the region around it. And I will cover a few topics. One is briefly the free port that is planned to be coming up in Dongo Kundu. The bunkering services. It's a very small item in terms of the shipping that we talk about, but over the years, a few areas, business, international tourism, but I just want to restrict myself to the potential of the local tourism, even as which we are hoping to grow when we do finally address the challenges that are there at the moment. The other area that I'll be looking at is shipbuilding and ship repair, which again, if you listen to the previous speaker, is something that is driving quite major activities in South Africa and the region, and we'd like to have a piece of that pie. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, a subject that probably is new, but then again, it's got its own potential, and I think it is something that just opposite the main Kilindini port, and it's a 3,000-acre piece of real estate. At the moment, it's wide open, but is for investment in that piece of real estate. You know, at the moment, we have vessels that are coming with small quantities of cargo, but then as a region, and if we can invest in distribution parks, then we do not therefore have to import small quantities of goods. We can actually import a whole shipload of any quantity and redistribute it. So there is an opportunity for those who wish to put in investment in terms of redistribution. Warehouses, which then can have goods that come in bulk, and of course, you know, we are dealing with economies of scale. When you import in small, go up. Of course, there's also an opportunity for office accommodation, where those who will be running the businesses within the free trade zone will require offices, intelligent offices, which are fully wired and ready for use. And even those who do not necessarily have to have permanent offices there, you can have a hoteling system where business people can come in, transact the business, have their business meetings, conclude their deals, and fly out at a fee. Of course, one major opportunity is one of assembly warehouses. We know we have companies here like the one which has got advertisement right on top of the Times Tower, Samsung Electronics. If they're able to bring in the assembly processes here, of course, then the redistribution cost, because the volumes that will come in this free zone will not be the single container or two containers, it will be large volumes. And of course, we have opportunities for light industries, for various activities that the business people can begin to grow. At the moment, we have EPZs which are spread all over the country, but if you have an opportunity of an EPZ within and the proximity, much less, they'll be close to the port, and the end product, again, will be so close. Transportation costs cars from Japan and various places, and more particularly from Dubai. I think we have an opportunity to create even a bigger Dubai from the Dongo Kundu free zone, because instead of bringing 500 cars in one vessel, you can actually bring 4,000 or 5,000 cars in one car carrier. And of course, the cost per unit will be definitely much less than what it will cost to bring 300-400 cars. And definitely, we've heard about the potential of the fishing in our sea, which again, rather than exporting the fish as fillets, we like to can that or repackage it, brand it with made in Kenya, and sell it abroad, as opposed to sending the full container load. It arrives in Europe with a completely different name. You not even recognize that is the Nile perch that we get from Lake Victoria. So, ladies and gentlemen, those are the opportunities that are available in Dongo Kundu Free Trade Zone. And of course, we have the forthcoming Lamu Port with similar and bigger facilities to cover even a bigger region. So I think the point I'm trying to make is that the time to position oneself is now, and not wait when eventually everything else has been taken up and you find that now you're the third or fourth person, or of course the markups increase. Ladies and gentlemen, the next topic I want to look at is the bunkering services. It's a very small aspect of what the port is about. But when you look at its impact today, it transcends across many factors. Back in the 1990s, we had 15 to 20 vessels of 10,000, up to 10,000 capacity, and these were able to supply bunkers to vessels that are in port, and even those who are just passing outside the port but are too big to enter the port. And that business alone was generating about 40 to 50,000 metric tons of bunkers. And of course, the capacity annually then, this is more than 20 years ago, was about 50,000 tons per month. And annually, we are talking of the volumes that we have. And I would imagine that would have expected that volume of traffic to grow in terms of wharfage to the port, piloted services, tug services, and indeed, one side business. Now, as of today, the installed capacity of bunkers is 710,000 metric tons. Now, from the 15 to 20 vessels that we had in the 1990s, today we are down to 3. And instead of the 10,000 tonners, we have only 1,500 tons capacity. And most of these are operating just within the port because, one, because of the size, they can't go too far out to sea. And secondly, what has limited that is the cost of the bunkers. One thing is that, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to mention is that very often, and in fact, more often than not, we look at the cargo itself. If you listened early this morning to the presentation, etc., we are hearing we're paying demurrage for cargo, we are paying container demurrage, etc. We are focusing on the cargo. But actually, very little focus is being placed on the ship itself. The cargo is for the importers and exporters, and we forget that the ship itself is a customer. And I think it's important at this stage to start looking at what exactly does the ship mean. In my view, the ship is looking for a supermarket. Just as much as you go to the supermarket, you want to get your vegetables there, you want to get your maize flour, you want to get your rice, your sugar, etc., in one-stop shop. You do not wish to have to go for sugar in one shop, a vegetable in another, because again, then the logistics become very complicated and expensive. So what do I mean? When a ship owner decides to call a port, he wants to look at, in totality, the services he gets. Apart from discharging or loading the ship, he wants to know, do I have sufficient bunkers to go to that port and come back? If I don't have, can I get those bunkers there? For the crew, do I have sufficient provisions for the crew to go to that port and come back? Or do I have to get fresh provisions in that port? Does the ship have enough water? Those who recall the port of Mombasa back in the 90s and before, when you look at the 14-day list, you have the vessels that are coming to discharge and load, and then there is another list at the bottom for vessels that are coming for bunkers, water, lubricants, and etc. Now, today, that was, I think, 2/3, 1/3. Today, if you're lucky to see that list, you probably have 1 or 2 vessels coming for bunkers and water, or maybe 3. And most of the time, you find they're just the local vessels which are based in Mombasa. So what does that mean? If a ship cannot get its fuel in the port of Mombasa, what do? They load extra fuel, whether it is from Mumbai or from Jebel Ali, from Salalah, from Durban, wherever. Enough to take them to the round trip. And you know very well, those who are familiar with shipping, is that all that determines how many containers you can load. So if the ship is loading full bunkers to come to Mombasa and go back to its port of origin, it means it's going to carry less containers, because those containers do add weight. And when the weight for the container is reduced, it means therefore that it carries less containers, and each then container that is brought to Mombasa will have to contribute. And therefore, ladies and gentlemen, we need to look at what happened to our bunkering business. It may look $1 billion per year purely on selling bunkers, and I'm not counting the supplementary fees for the food, etc. Now, that business requires not much. a small policy tweak. In the 1990s, of course, when the business was booming, the authorities that we did find out, yes, there were some rogue players in the industry. And of course, what happened was that we shut it all down. Previously, what used to happen in the past was that you could get fuel, bunker fuel from refineries because it's a bonded place, bonded warehouse, and you can deliver to the ship without having to pay the taxes. Today, unfortunately, all the taxes have to be paid up front. You have, I think, a 7-day window. So that cost, which eventually, of course, you can claim back if you can demonstrate that you did ship it out to a foreign vessel, you can get it back. But the process is a bit long. What am I saying? I'm saying that we need to look at that policy tweak and say, let's supply these bunkers duty-free as before, and we leverage on the automation. Because since the early 90s, we have since come up with the electronic cargo tracking system, we have got e-seals, etc., which then can help us to monitor how those bunkers are moving from the bonded warehouse to the ship. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we have a potential of, with the current situation, we're looking at 1 billion Kenya shillings, and that is on the number of vessels that are coming today to pick up bunkers. But if they know that in Mombasa you can get bunkers at a price that is commensurate in that particular aspect, those who have been ship chandlers, they have disappeared. And so are those who are supplying the produce for them from Taita, from Kinangop, because the ship. So, ladies and gentlemen, there is quite a big opportunity in us freeing that policy situation from having the duty being paid for bunkers upfront, but to be determined if the bunkers are sold to a local vessel. Ladies and gentlemen, one other element which I would like to cover briefly as a potential investment destination, we would love to aspire to have these big ocean-going vessels. They don't come cheap, and they require a lot. Unfortunately, there's only 2 of those boats. Only
in the global trading system. So this is so important, an area of activity, that it should not remain in this room. I was at the Maritime in Durban in South Africa, and there were ministers of finance who had no clue about the importance of this industry. So I think you deny yourselves the opportunity to create a larger constituency than yourselves when you don't reach out to Africans everywhere. And my suggestion here is, please think together we can come around and take the message out so that we can build that constituency, generate the right kinds of policies, and get Africa out of its slave status. Thank you.
My name is Edward Odero, Director of Tricon International. I first congratulate Nancy for a good presentation that she did. Lift it up. Can I talk without? It was a good presentation. I also would want to chip in at the second presenter who gave her the data on where the ships were built in Mombasa, taken to Uganda. Many ships were built in Tanzania also that were taken to Uganda, like 5 ferries. I was asking the PS to help us. In Kisumu, we have the best dry dock and the best slipway in East Africa. If we can really put something into the coffers so that we can improve the facility in Kisumu, so that private stakeholders like us can build ships in Kisumu and also export to Uganda. Madam Nancy, I also want to congratulate you and thank you for working hard to see into it that we have a maritime college in Kisumu, World Bank funded maritime college. We would also want to see that the students who will be attending the training facility there have facilities like ship, the dry dock working in a better condition and the slipways in better conditions. So the principal secretary, see into it that Kisumu gets the best facility. But I also thank you that yesterday I saw the SBI doing measurements of the road going to the port. We will be glad to see that happening. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Kanonguru. I'm the founding chairman of Kenya Maritime Authority. And I would like to thank the presenters. I think the gentleman from South Africa was very informative, and I hope we can all learn from it. Mr. Musafiri has got a very good view of what opportunities there are in Kenya. But I only want to address one issue that he addressed, and that is the investment opportunities at Dogo Kundu. I've been associated with that issue since 1980, and every year we are told that Dogo Kundu will come about. We are hoping, not very long hereafter, at least there will be a road bridge with the West Mainland. But one of the issues that is vexing in Kenya today for investors is land. The moment government shows interest in a piece of land, it is invaded. People crop from nowhere and it demand the same land. What is there going to be a policy change such that if anybody wants to invest in Dogo Kundu, land will be available readily? If not, are we going to wait like 10 years, 15 years that Tiomin waited to be able to start mining? And I think this is something that should be addressed as part of a major policy issue for Dogo Kundu. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'd also wish to thank the presenters for their very good presentation and for the very insightful questions that have come from the floor. On the issue of, the issue from the gentleman from Kengen, on the issues of affirmative action, local content, ensuring that whatever we're doing in the maritime sector gets an element of local content. We are very alive to that, and in fact the government policy on even procurements where it is possible, local content is a requirement, and you've seen that even with the standard gauge railway, where 40% local content is a requirement for that contract. So it's something that is already within policy, and I believe it's something that we should then anchor in this maritime integrated policy as we move forward. Mr. Kidenda, with regard to Lake Victoria, the status of the Victoria Transport Act, which was an EAC document 207, it has been assented to, and is what actually Kenya Maritime Authority are utilizing to deal with some of the safety issues on the lake. But the issue is, again, the policy and the financing policy to support KMA and other institutions to actually enforce the law and implement it to the best of their ability. So that's one of the challenges that we have to face up to in terms of the organizations that are supposed to implement that legislation, that they have the capacity to implement. And I believe that is another area that the policy that we are working on must address itself to. Some of the incentives, I know, not adequate, but some of the incentives that are taking place within Lake Victoria is one of them is the issue of mapping of Lake Victoria in terms of the charts for navigation. That has been a very, very big challenge, because without the mapping of Lake Victoria for navigation, then the issues of insurance all come about. Financing vessels for that lake become a challenge, and therefore under the Lake Basin Authority there is work going on with regard to the mapping and charting of Lake Victoria, so that the standards and the navigational capability on Lake Victoria is improved, so that then there is greater opportunity for financing of vessels and therefore financing of business. The other aspect is that the government is already working with the World Bank and other development partners on a regional project for the development of infrastructure around Lake Victoria. That's a very important project, because you cannot build container facilities in Kisumu without requisite container facilities in Mwanza, in Port Bell, and other ports. So this is a regional project to ensure that the facilities around the lake are actually standardized, and therefore we're able to easily undertake business on the lake. The other policy decision that was made and has actually been implemented in a miscellaneous amendment bill of Parliament November last year is the transfer of the port of Kisumu and lake ports to the Kenya Ports Authority. Before that, it was under the Kenya Railways Corporation, and there was a strategic mismatch there. And therefore, moving it to KPA means that there is now a strategic match, and KPA, with the capacity that it has, will begin to upgrade the ports around the lake. You have just mentioned, somebody has just mentioned the training facility, again another project that is being undertaken by the Railway Training Institute with the Maritime College in Kisumu, again to support capacity building as an incentive to ensuring that the lake is being utilized. The comment on bringing the media into the mix is a very, very important step, and I fully support it. It's very important that during this policy development phase that we are going to get into, that the media continually are part of that process and are part of ensuring that we build that constituency. That to happen with KPA and the taking over of that port so that there is adequate investment. And then lastly, from Colonel, former Chairman KMA, Dongo Kundu is no longer going to be a dream. We're working with JICA. They're already working on a master plan for Dongo Kundu with the connection of the road that has already commenced, so that we can link Dongo Kundu to the island of Mombasa and then right across. The land issues, I believe now under the Land Act 2012, the issue of squatters and dealing with people who illegally acquire government land, I think is generally resolved at a legal level. And we expect that then we'll be able to maintain the 3,000 acres that we have there for the investments that have been shown in one of the presentations. Thank you very much.
It looks like there's a number of issues, but I thought that it's important that we decide, as this conference as early as now, that are we going to be forward-looking and saying we are making a start in developing a total spectrum of a new economy, or we are going to take a view of solving yesterday's problems, which even when solved, still don't change the position that Maritime holds in the bigger economy. So I do think that it's very, very important, and hence the issue of top-down and bottom-up. It's always the case that there is a need to take a big bite at what will yield the emergence of a new economy, than spend 90% of the time trying to resolve issues as individuals because it's a problem I'm already sitting with. I thought that's very critical that we need to deal with. I'm just taking, for an example, if you take issues of land and maritime, they're very easy to deal with, specifically because maritime tends to be confined to particular geographical areas in the country, unlike housing for persons, which is a nationwide problem. You can imagine the center, in the east, north, south, and west. But if we take a view and say that we are going to create the blue economy. Blue economy by its nature requires the set-asides of certain land portions for development by sectors within which particular companies and firms can imagine and then play. I can imagine that if you raise the issue of land specific to the project you are involved in, you are still not solving the problem. Free trade zone is a typical example of where you carve out an area to support a particular cluster of the industry. And then the industry itself plays within that space to create a new economic sector. I think it's going to be very, very important that we really take a different view to how, in the long term, we want to resolve the issue. And when I say long term, it's possible that that long term is within the first 5 years. But you all need to agree, what are the priorities of 5 years? How is it impacting on land portions? What are the investment incentives that are required? Because those are priorities of the nation. So it therefore talk to the two issues. Are we organized enough in the marine manufacturing to be able to talk to government with one voice across from land access all the way to incentives? Or are we going as individual companies and say, I want to play, I want to repair, I want to sell bunkers, I want to do the this and the that? It's not going to work. The size of the opportunity is so big that whilst we're doing our daily things, transacting on a daily basis, it is important that we start climbing onto another level of playing in the big game, because we have to transform our economy to accommodate our individual needs. The issues, for an example, of that are being raised about cabotage and so on and so forth. When you deal with cabotage as a specific intervention in the economy, it raises a number of issues. But when the country has made a decision in the industrial policy that want to industrialize as Kenya, so how it applies to the steel mills, how it applies to the manufacturers inland, just translates into the same being done within the exclusive economic zone of Kenya. It's not different one from the other. At the geopolitical level, that issue does not arise at all. It's individual agents who will come and make a lot of noise, but there's nothing in international law that says the nation must not have control over its exclusive economic zone. That's why it was called exclusive, so that you can make the call, because those waters by international law, under the UN law of the sea, have been ceded to Kenya, and Kenya can make that call. But be careful, because what we did, we worked with industry and said, for it to work, what does it mean for you? They said, when I'm putting a tender to build a ferry locally, I lose in the bid. Why? I'm bidding against somebody who comes out of Spain. Spain has got an export incentive policy. If you win a tender in a foreign country, developing country, you get back 15% of the total cost is given back to you. Can a Kenyan compete against that? It's questionable. Access to port land is very expensive. So we had to negotiate all these parameters and say, how do we bring down the cost of a local builder to bring them on par with a supply that would have come from outside? Taxation, incentives, industrial policy, all the instruments to still make you competitive. Once you are competitive, then cabotage does not arise, because you are providing to the market. The same way could have been provided by South Korea to the local industry. So we called our industries in. For an example, we've got coastal tankers that are moving gas and oil up and down the coastline of South Africa. And we just mentioned to say, this is what we've decided in terms of policy. How can we make it not painful to you? You are not in the business, you are Shell, you are BP, you are not in the business of transporting that oil, you are in the business of selling oil. How it moves is our decision. Then they came and said, let it not more cost, let the standards be upheld, let it still be safe, let insurance conditions be met, and so on and so forth. And we passed all these conditions to the local players and said, you meet these conditions, you can come and play in the cabotage environment. So cabotage does not have to make it more expensive, but you have to be careful against artificial competition by yards offshore that incentivize their people to come to your waters. And then one quick issue just on the media side. I do believe that Mr. Eric, who are here now, it's going to take, it's a whole nation intervention. There's no sector that can be reached by anybody better than the media can. And therefore, we are calling for specialized bouquet of communication platforms that will start educating all of us about where lies the opportunities and facilitate the dialogue between all players that are involved in the industry. We do not have those platforms in Africa. You go to London on a daily basis to buy Lloyd's, daily newspapers, there's information is galore, dailies on shipping. But you come to Africa, you get annuals, if you're lucky. But on a daily basis, you cannot tell what's happening. So I do think it's a natural link between us and ourselves. The last comment I thought would be very important that one makes is that in certain instances, we also need to be going for regional project management in this sector. And you look at the Lake Victoria, the infrastructure issues, and so on and so forth. There are certain infrastructures that cannot be carried by one nation, and certain skill sets that cannot be carried by one nation. And therefore, we need, in a certain way, I don't know how, but we've got the RECs, and we've got the AU continental-wise. We need to start activating our RECs. Kenya is a hub for the entire region. And Kenya can only execute and benefit if it plays a regional leadership role. Not only saying this is for Kenya, but it says when this is good, they export via me. When that's happening, I'm beneficial. Maybe The one thing I just want to bring back, I see that the focus on tourism seems to be on the cruise ships and a little bit of everything else. Marine tourism for this country, the potential is unmatched by any other sector in job creation terms. If you look globally, 12 out of the top 15 tourism destination and tourism countries are marine related in their products. 12 out of 15. Water sells. We spoke about tourism, about cruise, we spoke about recreation, leisure, and so on and so forth. Real estate, I was taken aback this morning when it was revealed that real estate in Kenya, the closer to the sea, the cheaper it is, because people want to be facing the other way. In the basket of tourism products, you'll see the way we dealt with the issue. We included real estate. Kenya does not have a single beach tourism facility. And we've got some of the best waters, warm throughout the year, beautiful beaches. Mauritius beats many countries, but the secret of Mauritius is one. There's only one beach tourism in Mauritius. Annual number of visits, it's 1 million. 1 million to one facility. What do our countries have? They have a hotel by the sea, but not a beach tourism. So hence I was raising the issue that let's not solve yesterday's problems today. This forum, Blue Economy, is about saying, how do we pick the few things that will lead to the many things happening? But the few things need to come in a manner. You've got the presidential endorsement today. It never gets better than that. You get cabinet endorsement for this program. You've got parliament behind you. You've got the whole country behind you. Why do you want to fix yesterday's dry dock and not fight for market share? Why are you even shy to go back to the 1990s bunkering numbers and just want to do the 5 million liters of bunkers? You are a hub. I thought this conference honestly has to be. I thank you.
Together right from the morning. We came to make you aware of what is there in the sector, and I believe you are seeing a lot of it. From the presentations right from the morning, then further up by more opportunities which are there in the sector. And then we have very nice presentation on case studies. What I just want to comment, we just have to talk. And the talking has started. To hear that we are talking after 50 years about the maritime just today tells you that we need to move with a lot of speed. And moving at this speed, I like the statement that came from somebody. He talked of affirmative. We have to deal with this sector affirmatively in one way or another. We talk of affirmative. We are all familiar with affirmative as an English word, which has seen other sectors given more preference and support because of the significance and recognition of how far behind they're lagging. So then when we hear confirmation from the PS that the policy initiatives are going to be taken very seriously, that's very good news. And that makes me warm up very, very well. When we also hear of how then, now you are all very knowledgeable on what clusters are there in the maritime sector, the kind of monies that have been shown on the slide, spoken by word of mouth. And the example that you get from South Africa, they just didn't lock people suddenly. They really had to talk. I remember in one of their talking sessions, they had what they call the cluster commanders. I don't know whether they are the cluster commanders or cluster champions. Those ones who were engaged to dig deep into what exactly is there in a particular cluster and how can we bring it up so that we translate the thoughts into clear actions. So then what I must say that this recognition of so much in the sector, I tell you what some other countries are doing. They have what is called this cluster development fund. They allocate a certain amount of money, which is availed within the normal banking systems, within a bank, that will support the people who have seen what you have seen today and are willing to put their money, but are not able to go to the normal commercial banks to get the money at the rates which are prevailing. So along with the giving of the money is the technical advice and the monitoring framework to see how are you really meeting the aspirations of what this conference is revealing today. So when we put those two in tandem, the technical support plus what the IMO Secretary General said, that we need people to learn from others, and then we just move. Sometimes we don't have to be original. Original can be very costly. It takes time. When we're talking on affirmative action, just see where it has worked and see what you can bring it. And then have just 3 questions. What are we doing? Why are we doing it? What works and what doesn't work? And I'm very happy that we have reporters here. They're capturing these thoughts and they're coming out clearly. At the end of this, then we want to see that we talk more and bring these things out. And even if it comes to locking people in, to really see how we can really get certain implementable plans of action to drive this sector, then I'm sure we'll not be talking of the billions that have been cited here. We'll begin to see them live. And when we begin to see them, and that is when it's a paradox. It is sad that the communities that perhaps live next to waters can go without a meal. And yet it is these waters that really, this is where the billions are lying. So we just have to find how to get the matrix right, work out the best way we can, so that we can be able to do it well. And when you talk of cabotage, ideally it works in places where there is several, 1 or 2, 3 ports in a particular country. In our case, we just have to go regional. We have the South Africa there, we have the Tanzanians there, the Somalis, and all these ones. We just have to come together because as a Kenya, we only have Mombasa. Lamu is coming up and it's yet to pick up, and the volumes that can exchange between Mombasa and Lamu are still very low. So if you go regional, the West Africans they took approach, and those who are daring enough to get ships and start trading, utilizing that policy. We met with one of them who flew to South Africa, some captain. I can't just remember his name, but you could hear from the talk and the way he was perceiving this issue of how they are benefiting from the cabotage. The sounds of his words were smelling a lot of very good money. A lot of very good money. And we need to speak with the sounds of good money coming from engagement with the sector and doing the best that we can for this thing that God has given us, and it can work. So it's a good thing. Let's talk. Let's keep on talking. If we can't talk and agree, then we'll definitely, PS will just have to lock us in a room somewhere so that we can really come and get a plan that we can put on the ground, and we see this industry coming up and picking to be what it wants to be. I would encourage you to look at the concept notes, to look at the output. They're very good ones. And the writings that are there about this, and the facts. The Maritime Fact Book is very rich. So among you here, I'm sure there are some people with money who want to put into this sector. But even if you don't have money, the policy will capture the cluster development fund that will support you so long as you have the passion, the idea, the interest, and you discover enough from the fact book and the many other exchanges that you're going to receive from the few presentations and many others which are coming. That's what I want to say, just to cut it short and obey the moderator. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll keep my comments very brief, and I'll start with the last comment about the sound. Is it the sound or smell of money? And I'm just looking at the last numbers we had on the maritime sector performance, and it's clear the maritime sector as a percentage of GDP is growing. As a contribution to employment, it's declining. Per capita earnings in the sector are higher than the rest of the economy. So clearly people are making money in the economy, but that money is not going to everyone, and it's certainly the domestics are losing out if you are looking at the numbers. It's been pointed out to you that the size of the cake or the size of the opportunity is big. The President in the morning, His Excellency the President gave a commitment. So I think the way forward is to figure out how to get tangible results out of the opportunities that are present. I hope when the time comes for people to be locked up in a room, they will work and produce results. Thank you.
I think let's give the whole panelists a good clap. Tell your neighbor, wake up. Tell your neighbor, wake up. The reason I'm saying wake up is not that you are sleeping, okay? Don't get me wrong. It's not that you are sleeping. It's to re-emphasize a point that South Africa is trying to bring to the table. It's very common to be abnormal. Very, very common to be abnormal. But it is very rare that you are normal. Okay? It's very, very rare that you are normal. Now he is trying to give us a philosophy that if we are not careful, we will discuss the already done policy ministry papers. We will remove 1960, including 1950. You cannot solve yesterday's problems with the thinking that created them. From one side, Kismayo, by the time you touch Tanzania on the other side, the front which you have an ocean is 600 kilometers. So the challenge you have in front of you is you are dealing with a GDP per person in Kenya of $1,000. Thinking, check the books sitting in your brain, because they may be the source of your problem. So you may need to redo a bit of rethinking. If you go Norway, fishing in Norway on its more than $20 billion. $20 billion in English, Eric will tell you, is just about our current budget. Yes or no? In Kenya sharing terms. So you are saying one item in one country is your total budget. And what we are asking ourselves in this conference, what do we know new that our peers, Eric, who advised the president, can go with and say, yes, we had something new? Because that's the challenge we are sitting on, because that's what my brother from South Africa has been trying in a polite way. You know, he is a foreigner. He is a visitor. Clap for him. Clap for him. Clap for him. But he was trying to be very polite. I can hear Juma there from Kenya National Shipping Line. You have a whole organization called Kenya National Shipping Line with no Kenyan ship. Are you together? Now, this type of contradictions, because the parastatal was created, let it always remain there. You know, these are things you have to wake up one day and hold on and say, hold on, how come Ethiopia has a ship with no ocean? Because they realized you don't have, so they created the Africa opportunity themselves. The other point which is important is that no country is overtaking the other one. Are you together? So the game is not an overtaking game. It's not the game we are in. It's a competitiveness game. It is, what do you have better than another port? What do you have better in knowledge than another country? What data is out there? And that's why I like the media question. If I don't know that you can fish in Kenya, how will I fish in Kenya? All our fish in the deep sea currently is stolen. I don't know that you are aware of that. Because you don't have even the naval capacity to go into the deep sea itself. So you need to talk these things in a language that brings the reality of the real figures on the table. Now, if you are used to earning 10 million shillings per month, which I know the PS earns, and a few others, you may not think that that figure is very tiny, but 10 million is petty cash to some fellows. So you need to start hearing, for you to have a fishing industry of 20 billion, the messenger in that company earns what our PS currently earns. Are you together? So if you deal with the poverty rethinking, you have to rethink a lot of assumptions sitting in your brain. And this, I think, PS, is the challenge we are sitting on. How do you hear what John said? How do you hear what was communicated to the president? Because it's one thing to talk. Yeah, Dua, the MD of KPA, was saying 2003, Kenya discussed the same thing we are discussing in 2015. So where is our disease from that what we know we seem never to implement? So these are the questions I want us to start talking to. And with those very many words, we want to invite the next presenter who will start unlocking that story, building a maritime nation. Harry from Liberia. Let's put our hands together for Harry. The rest of the panelists, if you want to take your other seats, please feel free. So Harry, please come and share your experience with us. Thank you. He has come all the way from Liberia through Radan. And for purposes of disclosure, because accountability is a national value in Kenya, Dr. Kesri was denied permission to fly because of the traditional usual stories.
I gave her the soft copy. She didn't give it to you.
Let me see what they did. Which one? This one? This one?
Yeah.
This is Mark. In case you need it.
Is it for what is this?
Yes, that is for. Okay. Yes, and this is Mark. Back again.
Okay. Good afternoon to all. I'm sure as some of you walked around the conference hall today, you must have been wondering who is this Oliver Twist we have in our midst. I'm Oliver Twist because I'm the only delegate carrying 2 tags. I'm carrying 2 tags because my boss, Honorable Bian Kesali, couldn't make it here to the conference. He had connecting flight problem in Abidjan. But given his commitment to his sister, Madam Nasekiri Geku, he made sure that he sent the presentation to me and has asked me to do it on his behalf. By way of introduction, I'm my country's representative to the International Maritime Organization, the IMO. I'm based in London. I've been there for the past 3 years. And my last assignment before I got posted to London, I was the Chief of Staff to Honorable Bian Kesali. So you should rest assured it's as Bian Kesali is present. With our protocol duly observed, I will be speaking on building a maritime nation. The topic that was sent to Honorable Kesali was the issue of building an African merchant fleet. But he thought that would be too narrow, and he thought to broaden it to building a maritime nation and subsumed the building of merchant fleet under that subtopic. Elements of a fully integrated blue economy, Africa's interventions in building a blue economy, the Liberian perspective, and of course the way forward. What does a fully integrated blue economy mean? What does it look like? A blue economy is one that has the ability to strategically coordinate and execute against all of these issues, which you may have seen in one form or the other. Shipbuilding, dry docking, water ecotourism, luxury, transport, bunkering, shipbreaking, fishing, offshore services, and of course other core competencies that you can also leverage. At the end of the day, what we are chasing, what we want to have is this. The dollar value of all these things is what we are looking for. That's what we want to have. Having said that, Africa hasn't sat still. There has been some level of interventions that has been made to achieve this blue economy one way or the other. The issue of Africa, there has been leadership for the past 50 years. Past leaders have tried to take advantage of the ocean space. We know that the African Maritime Transport Charter that you hear about, it started in South Libya. They went down to Tunisia, you had the 1994 version. They went down to South Africa 2009, and then they moved down to Uganda in 2010 when they have the revised version, the most updated one to date. I will talk a little bit about that in the front. We have ECOWAS, we have SADC, we have ECAS, and of course the African Union. They are all trying to undertake one measure or the other to make sure we get the maximum benefit from our maritime domain. The most recent document is the Africa Integrated Maritime Strategy, AIM 2050, as it's commonly called, and it make sure that we exploit our maritime domain and get the full economic potential that makes sure the continent benefits. In this light, you have issues like Common Africa Defense and Security Policy, you have a Common Fishery Policy, you have an Industrial Benefit Policy, an Integrated Africa Human Resource Development Strategy, and of course there's one that is not mentioned here. There's what you call the Combined Exclusive Maritime Zone of Africa, commonly called CENZA. It's a core element of this 2050 AIM strategy. So it is what you are doing today, wanting to leave from the land, going to the seas, and developing a new frontier is something that the AU and other regional bodies are already thinking about. But since the regional bodies will depend on the member states, so if Kenya get its house in order, it will be better for the AU. Now, I was talking about the African Maritime Transport Charter earlier, where it seeks to promote, among other things, the growth and development of African merchant fleet, which is cool, encourage reform and efficiency in port operations, as well as expansion of information systems, promote the establishment of regional and national maritime funds for the development of maritime industry, modernization and harmonization of maritime laws across sub-regions, expansion of maritime regulations, and improve transparency and accountability, improve security capabilities to counter piracy and armed robbery at sea, and of course, establish and strengthen national and regional maritime education and training, MET, and research institutions. But there's one thing I want to say about this charter. Interestingly enough, if you went to the AU website, we need just 15 countries to ratify this document for it to come into force. The revised charter of 2010, the website shows we only have 5 countries. Grand ideas, when it comes to implementation, it is a challenge. And we have this foot dragging because of issue of national protection of national sovereignty. Safety, security, transport, and environmental protection. That
have we come? Let me go back and see if I can play this. Cannot find my mouse here. And shipping and the interrelatedness and how one works with the other. It's unfortunate I'm not able to show it. But let me quickly move on to a case study of Ghana. As I said, I've left aside the cluster and I'm looking in terms of ports and shipping. I'm looking at the cluster in terms of hydrocarbons, oil and gas. Because oil and gas is very important, and I am made to understand that in East Africa, there's been large finds of resources of oil and gas. So I have no doubt that that will be a driver, as it were, going forward as far as East African countries are concerned. And indeed, I just put a small quote here. A US senator once said, if Kuwait was producing carrots, Iraq's occupation of that country would have been permanent. So it should tell you the importance that they attach to oil and gas. And therefore, hydrocarbons, when we have found them, means that we need to put appropriate mechanisms in place. And if we have fiscal mechanisms, that would ensure that we derive benefits, maximum benefits. I heard this morning one of the speakers talked about cabotage, for example. It's very important that in all of this, we develop a local content, because that local content is critical to what we do. We may not have all of the financing to start with, but in the agreements that we draw, it is imperative that we put in a certain local content mechanism that would allow us to derive maximum benefits from. This morning I was talking to my friends from Nigeria, and we were talking about the freight forwarding industry and what it holds, and the fact that all of us have grown up knowing that as a ship owner, you go into a terrain, you don't know that terrain, and therefore you rely on local expertise in that terrain. Today, however, that is not the case, because you find out that the same shipping lines that have come into our country, the same shipping lines have set up agencies, and now even they are going to the extent of doing freight forwarding. So that is what we need to be addressing and looking at and building capacity in that regard. I have touched here very quickly on a few things. The current legal regime of Ghana has about 5 different laws. What existed prior to the discovery of oil and gas, and then what we have added on after the discovery of oil and gas. The Jubilee fields is how we term the first find of oil and gas in Ghana. I think the main underlying principle is cost recovery and profit sharing. And under that, we have royalty. So one of the key things which we have in that is royalty. Under the royalty, we have come on a very low threshold because we have looked at other areas where we can benefit. In fact, that low threshold compares. If you take Nigeria, for example, they are looking at royalties of around between 4% to 12%. And then in Indonesia, they are looking at about 10%. We have taken a very low threshold and have incorporated other areas where we think we can benefit. For example, petroleum income tax. And we are taking about 35%, as it were, on income tax for companies, international oil companies that operate in this domain. We've also said that we don't have all the money, but we want to be a part of the exploitation of that resource. And therefore, if you are talking about shares, why don't you carry us on your back? You are strong enough, you have strong limbs, you have the money. We can, but carry us on your back. So we also participate. So we also have introduced a carried interest that makes us a part owner also of the Jubilee fields. And then we have other fiscal regimes, additional or paying interest. In the Jubilee fields, we have put this at 3.75%, such that we can also pay part of the cost and then become a part owner of the find. Then additional oil entitlement. In times when there are supernormal profits, then we say, no, look, at the time we entered into this, we all had an average of about $90. Today it's $140. There are supernormal profits. We need to share in that supernormal profit. And that also is something that Ghana has done as far as this is concerned. Now the oil price levels have dropped, and therefore we've come back to the averages. Should they go up again to areas where we have supernormal profits, then we can also benefit from that. We also are taking annual surface rents. And it's important that maybe as East Africa develops or explores and exploits its oil and gas resources, it should look at the issue of decommissioning. I mean, a lot of us who are in the maritime industry know that once the oil companies have come in, this is a finite resource, and consequently, it means it will get finished one day. Once they finish, the rigs are all left in the sea like that, and sometimes they hamper navigation. It is important that we include decommissioning as part of the fiscal regime that we put in place. Sometimes decommissioning cost alone is over billions of dollars. In the North Sea, for example, a number of rigs that were to be decommissioned cost around $20 billion to just decommissioning them, and therefore it becomes imperative that you include this in the fiscal regime. Sometimes we say, well, no export duties, no import duties for what you bring in. We give you opportunity for full cost recovery. No. I think, as I said earlier on, there are various types of fiscal regimes. There is generally what we call the concession and then the contractual arrangements. All of these are things that we need to look at when we are giving out a particular resource. The resource types that are drivers for many countries have been the oil and gas, that is the hydrocarbons, and then the shipping and ports area. Because in this area, you can have appendages that all of them lead to a situation in which you derive benefits from your maritime resource. I've talked about the determinants of the fiscal regimes and how effective these could be. Very importantly is the issue of maritime clusters, because they are known, they have proven to show that there are ancillary benefits that come across. Today, as I heard Nancy, she talked about insurance, talked about banking, talked about freight forwarding. All of these are ancillary to ports and shipping. And it's only when you begin to look at it in that bigger frame that you can understand their bearings. If you see banking as independent of itself, if you saw insurance as independent of itself, then you cannot imagine how much we are losing by way of insurance, which we pay under a CIF contract. So it is important for us to look at things in terms of the cluster approach under the cluster dynamics. So in developing a policy, we look at an integrated maritime policy that takes cognizance of all of this. I've mentioned that Ghana, we have taken hydrocarbon as a case study, and we have realized that we can get some benefits upstream, more benefits midstream, and even more benefits downstream. And that is the approach which we have taken to ensure that a number of people are involved. Sometimes we think these things come by themselves, but I agree with Chiedi that they don't come by themselves. We need to lock people up in a room. They need to make a decision. We need to say this is the start date. And consequently, on that date, we must see ourselves to start, regardless of even the pitfalls that we would have. That, for me, is very important. It is only then that we can derive those synergistic benefits that I mentioned are important as far as clusters are concerned. But, Commander, as I said, I'll take the key away to Ghana, and then when I'm coming back, I'll bring it. Finally, let me say that all of this can only be done through building collaborative partnerships, and that is the way forward. If you have somebody on your shoulder, can you get to him? What advantages can you pick from there? If you have someone on your left shoulder, what advantages can you pick from there? If South Africa has made progress in a particular direction, to what extent can we leverage that? Use that as a basis so we don't go reinventing the wheel, as it were. And that collaborative partnership, for me, is the way forward for attaining that competitiveness which we seek to achieve. Thank you very much.
Give him another clap. We are coming to the close plenary now. John Jiraine, I don't know whether he has arrived. So John Musafiri, please come back. You're part of the panelists. So we are going to take questions on the two sessions which have been given, but we can stand up just to stretch so that we release a bit of the blood sugars. Just stand up to stretch kidogo. Greet your neighbor if you don't mind. Greet your neighbor if you don't mind. Tell your neighbor you are born an original. Tell your neighbor you are born an original. Don't dare die a copy. You are born an original. Don't dare die a copy. Let's sit down. So it's time for questions. This time we'll start with this side, then we come to the middle, and we end up on this side. So questions from this side, please, on the two sessions, or on any other issue that you feel you want to bring out at this time. This side, please, if there is any. Yes, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Chairman. Mine is more or less a comment, may not be a question. I'm Professor Lo Budho, former chairman of Kenya Marine and Fisheries Research Institute. I've listened very keenly, very interesting discussions. I've not dealt very much with Maritime Authority, but I want to pick from the last comment of the last speaker. We can talk here for 2-3 days, 1 week, 1 month. If we don't build collaboration, ladies and gentlemen, I can assure you we will not move. It is about collaboration. It's about knowing where we are. It's about addressing the challenges that Madam CEO addressed so that we can pick from the challenges, ask ourselves, where are we? Where do we want to go? For how long do we want to reach there? What needs to be done for us to reach there? Mr. Chairman, if we can ask ourselves those questions, then I think PS, even after this, you can lock people up and tell them to ask those questions, answer them, and then you have an answer for the president, who was very passionate this morning. Thank you.
I'm Saif Bendera Rocky. I want to look at a few issues here, but what is disturbing me most is every presenter was coming there was talking about innovation. I think innovation is a very important tool if I take it very seriously. But right from the time when you came in the morning, I can quote here that the DG, Nancy, was saying in our welcome remark that conference to bring together government and stakeholders to agree on the way forward in order to encourage investments in the whole range of opportunities available in the sector. I think this is very normal and quite ambitious for us. I've been to conferences where, by the end of the day, people take resolutions as pedestrians. They're not very serious. But I think if we were to look at this and digest it, I think we'll reach someplace. Now, looking at what everybody was talking about, the literature is pegged on Vision 2030. And the Vision 2030 are 3. Why I'm saying this is that when you talk about the blue economy, we need to be very careful, because we see that since the inception of maritime, awareness has not actually reached in many places, just because it is kind of the bottom down. No, sorry, the top bottom approach. Meaning, we are losing a very important element here in fishing. I've been to Turkana, I've been to Kisumu, and a lot of places. Even from Lamu, the coastal waters, up to Vanga. But surprisingly, the fishermen, we have a terminology in say peasant farmers, but those are peasant, let me borrow this word, these are peasant fishermen. Why? Because they're incapacitated. They are not able to do the fishing as it were. So what I'm suggesting here that we put in our heads together is that if somebody will come from the heaven to think about this economy, this blue economy, in terms of trying to put across what we call affordable boats, affordable motorboats for the local people here, I think this will do us a lot of service. But PS, I think this is very important that when you talk, we shall talk about economy. We shall talk about shifting from land to sea. But the important person here we are missing out is the local person. I think if we can afford the heaven and tell us that okay, between this date and this date, we shall try to work out miraculously, bring out boats that are affordable to the local wananchi. When that is done, I think we shall be felt everywhere in Kenya. But when you talk about transforming our energies from land to sea, and then we talk about investments and very, very big investors without necessarily having to go down to the local wananchi, I think that is something that we need to look at very seriously. So my message here to the conference is that although we want to turn, to go back to the sea in terms of productivity and so on and so forth, the most important person that we should consider is the local person. And we need to make this person enjoy and get some resources out of that sea. Our local fishermen in Diani, in Msambweni, in Vanga, even in Lamu, they go out in the morning, early in the morning. When they come back from the sea, they have very small, little fish. And when you ask them what the reason is, they said, I could not go to the sea, the deep sea, because I don't have, good boats for us to take us there. So please, affordable boats for the local Mwananchi. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm Steve Owaki from Seafarers Union of Kenya. And my first question is on a physical regime. And this goes to the government. And the question is that I don't know if we have had or if we have any physical regime in relation to maritime industry. Because we find a case whereby we have been having foreign fishing vessels being licensed to fish in the Kenyan waters, and it only ends there. No any employment offered to the Kenyan people, and nothing much derived from that fishing vessels, apart from being issued with the license. Licensing of foreign fishing vessels in the Kenyan waters. And it's also tied to my second question, in which we have had the Kenya Merchant Shipping Act as the law guiding the maritime sector. And since 2010, the act has been challenged in courts, and to date the case is still ongoing. So if that is the trend, then to me, I have the fear that what guarantee do we have all these efforts we are having to revive the industry if it all end up the same way? And finally, my third question is, we also need to get the assurance from the government, and this in regard to the presentation from the presenter from South Africa, in which he strongly pointed out that behind all these efforts, there must be individuals. And the success of this initiative will depend on at one point, on the personalities of those individuals behind the process. And at any given time, if they will not be there probably 2 months, 3 months down the line, then there's a risk probably the process may not continue as expected. So what guarantee do we have from the government that the people actually who have come up with this initiative will be there to see it through probably 2 to 3 years down the line? Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Fumi Folorusho, Secretary General of the African Ship Owners Association. I will touch upon just fleet development in Kenya as part of the African Fleet Development Initiative. First and foremost, I wish to say to my dear brother from Ghana, he sees critical factors, ports and shipping. In the association, we say everything in maritime, everything revolves around the ship. The authority, the maritime authority, the ports, human resources, whatever you have, you start off with the ships. So if you do not take your ship acquisition, ship development, vessel development seriously, all other things with time might collapse. Elements of building a merchant fleet. We shall not look at Africa, we shall look at Kenya. My brother from Liberia has enumerated quite a bit. I will not go over it. But I wish to point out that there's a need for a political will. A political will, starting from the presidency. I'll take 2 examples. In Indonesia, their fleet development started from a statement by the president. We hear that he would love more Indonesians to own vessels. The rest is history. It was not an act of parliament, it was a will, an expressed will of the president. Nigeria is an example of this statement. However, Nigeria made it law. In the 80s, when we had this, I'm not sure what it was, indigenization or whatever it was, and there was that expressed willingness for vessels, Nigerians to own vessels. In the registry of ships, and we have figures, we had virtual inflows because cargo was reserved for Nigerians, and we had inflows. I want to correct a belief that we have in Africa, which makes us keep dancing around vessel acquisition. It is not money that drives vessel acquisition. It is trade. Could I explain? Kenya Shipping Line is here. If government, if Mr. President, His Excellency, said tomorrow morning, this amount of cargo in and out of Kenya will only be carried by Kenya Shipping Line, 10%. Kenya Shipping Line does not have to go to the banks. Shipyards, ship owners would start calling them and say, do you have the capacity to carry this? If Africans have trade, and that's where Shippers Council, the African Shippers Council initiative that is being run by MOCA, which we're looking at having all of Africa buy into, will support an African fleet development. Cargo drives vessel acquisition, not the finance. That comes after. Because even if the bank is willing to give you $50 million US, its first question is, and how are you going to pay back this loan or this facility? If you don't have trade, he's not going to give you, no matter who you are. I am specifics now. could we declare a Kenya Ship Owners Initiative as part of our plan, where we, just like Madam President in Liberia, Liberia is well respected in IMO, with tonnage and whatever. But she came into power and she said, we want to move from this place to this place. Can we as Kenyans move from being Kenya Shipping Line without a vessel to Kenya Shipping Line with vessels? And we have the Alpha Marines, we have the shipyards go into proper business of vessel repair, vessel building, and whatever not. A Kenya Ship Owners Initiative. And what we want to achieve in the next 1 year. How many vessels? What's on it? What do we want? Is it fishing, trawling, whatever we want to do? That's finally, I would want, yes. Dr. Kofi has asked Commander to identify the room. Commander reminds us that in South Africa, they had to bring their stakeholders and ask, how would this impact on you? They asked their stakeholders. They interacted with their stakeholders. When he identifies the room, Dr. Kofi picks up the key. Please take out their cell phones. Make sure they don't have laptops. Put your stakeholders in a room and sit down and say, Mr. President wants Kenyans to own vessels. Within the next 1 week, let us draw an agenda for vessel acquisition in Kenya. This would be a good follow-up to this very well-organized conference, and which we're hoping that through MARAD, Commander being here, we replicate in other African countries and finally get this African Fleet Development Initiative moving. Madam Nancy, congratulations.
Thank you. My name is Dr. Charles Lagat from Moi University, Kenya. Mine is a comment, and it has come from the speakers this afternoon and also in the morning regarding human resource development. The importance of developing human resource as a cluster area in marine management. And it is very important to develop the human resource, not only for the industry here in Kenya for the industry here in Kenya, but also looking at it as another export, that when we develop the human resource, they can work in other parts of Africa and other parts of the world, just like other countries are doing. Philippines was mentioned in the morning. So I think that's an area which, as we move forward, the ministry, PS is here, the ministry should look into supporting the institutions that are providing professional courses and also the public universities who have introduced programs in this area. And I wanted to also mention that apart from Jomo Kenyatta University, Moi University has also introduced programs in this area. We have introduced Bachelor of Marine Management at the main campus, which is now, we have the first graduate who finished last year, December, and the second batch will be finishing in June of about 40 students. This is a program which we started in Moi University at the main campus, but moving forward, we are looking at running this program from our campus in Mombasa, which will give the students an opportunity to take up attachments in the industry. So that's a comment I wanted to make, so that we look at it as the public universities have already taken the initiative
to assist in developing human resource for this field. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. My name is Nasrul Amirali, Managing Director, Monasa Fishnet, Kenya Limited. My comments are sort of the first speaker's comments supporting the issue of the common people already in the industry, which there should be surely dialogued and supported. For example, mechanization of the fishing industry is very important. From Lake Victoria, Lake Turkana to the coast. The boats carry 25% import duty. Now, if this is removed, it would help to bring in boats at a very reasonably priced. The international prices are very, very reasonable, but the heavy duties are hampering the mechanization of the industry. For example, can you imagine the life jacket? Very important. Our company is now subsidizing and selling at half the price, but we pay 16% VAT on life jacket. Nowhere in the world is this done. Life jackets are usually life-saving, and they are without any import duty. Tuna fisheries are suffering because fish hooks carry 25% duty and 16% VAT, 50% taxes on an item which would enhance the tuna fishery on the coast. Fishing floats, fishing ropes, 25% duty, 16% VAT. I think fishing industry attracts a lot of employment, a lot of export. You see the Nile perch carries a lot of, every kilo is exported and we earn a lot of US dollars, but we pay heavy duties on the gear. Most of the countries in the world do not have any duties on fishing gear and things like that. I hope that this should be debated, and if the delegates find it reasonable, it should be corrected. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. My name is Evelyn Mwamure from Kenya Ports Authority. I wish to take this opportunity to thank all the speakers. This has been it's been an eye-opener, very interesting, and very hard facts that have been placed on the table before us. It has been mentioned that we don't have enough capacity in the industry. That is true. But I would like to offer that for the current task that is before us, just to pick from what the nice lady said on my right, that we need to sit somewhere, we need to do something. Somebody also said, another lady up there, I would like to offer the over 70 alumni expertise, which is in this country today. We have about 70, maybe 78 people who've been to the Maritime University and to IMLI, and I'm sure in other disciplines related to the maritime industry. I would offer that we need to tap on this. We already have something to start what we need to do. And let me say that it's very diverse knowledge. You know, we have those who did port management, we have others who did shipping, We have people who are experts in maritime safety and environmental protection. We have maritime educationists and trainers. So I'm just offering that there is that pool. If it can be used, it will help our cause. Thank you.
Once again, my name is Edward Odero. In addition to what one of us have just said in regards to increasing vessels, I'll concentrate in Lake Victoria because that's where I come from. Policies can help us if we bring in a policy of tonnages that are supposed to go by road. This will also help the government in managing their roads. If we encourage rail and water transport, especially in Lake Victoria, then we bring a policy that certain tonnage of cargo is not allowed to use road, then definitely it will encourage private investors to invest more on vessels in Lake Victoria. That will help to transport goods in the neighboring countries. So I encourage the government, or ask the government to implement policies that would help us maintain our roads and also encourage investors to build ships. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, thank you for the presenters. Your presentations have been very, very educative. I would like to start by picking a thread of, from a lady across there about the role of the shipper and the ship owner. Like every customer, I believe in the seaborne trade, the cargo owner is the most important person. And we have not heard, personally, I have not heard a very strong voice coming from them as to what they experience and what they expect. And I think this is something that we can address. I also like to point out that the government is the largest shipper. There was a time that government cargo was carried in designated vessels. I don't think that policy obtains today. And also, I do not think there is anything in international law that could stop that happening. And I think there are provisions in UNCTAD that national cargo should be carried in designated vessels as dictated by the country involved. And I think this is where we should, when it comes to seaborne trade, we should look into ways of making the industry benefit us more. The other point I want to raise is with regard to the ship register, as presented by the gentleman from Liberia. We have recently some cases where some vessels belonging to some countries have been interdicted, for that matter, even embargoed. Now, how do you deal with the problem of carriage of embargoed cargo in the ships bearing in your register? How do you deal with vessels themselves that have been embargoed, or for countries that have been embargoed? This certainly is something that we need to address if you're going to have a ship register. The same register would carry ships that go and abandon crews on the high seas or elsewhere. How do you deal with those, with that problem as well? The other point I would like to address is with regard to the fiscal regime for the clusters. And one of the things that people keep on talking about is once you have a resource, particularly oil and gas, then you have something in Africa, something called a resource curse. I like to believe that Ghana has been able to address that adequately, but still raise the question, for whom is the fiscal regime developed? The first person who addressed this issue is obviously the government. Is a regime for taxation for revenue? They also, especially in Kenya today, with the new constitution, communities have become very vocal of what they expect from a resource. Now, a fiscal regime, will a fiscal regime address their concerns? Then, of course, the industry itself. Do we want to encourage the industry to grow, and should therefore the regime thereafter address issues of concern such that the industry is not suppressed? And finally, what do you do with the regime that in order to address the general economy generally? And I would like to hear from the gentleman from Ghana how you've been able to balance all these concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I will start from the last speaker who talked about vessel interdiction, embargo cargoes, countries under embargo, and abandonment of crews. Now, when you talk about vessel interdiction, basically, the reasons why vessels are often interdicted or detained is either because they have not met the safety requirements as laid down by the International Maritime Organization. So the best way to avoid such thing is to make sure when you own your vessel, make sure your vessel is surveyed at the appropriate time. There are statutory surveys. When your vessel, before your vessel leaves manufacturing, leave the place of manufacture and comes into service. And usually, vessel owners often relied on surveyors provided by IACS, the International Association of Classification Societies. They have surveyors that will do these things for you, that make sure the vessel is up to standard. So when you call to regions like the Paris MOU or the Tokyo MOU, you don't have your vessels interdicted. Do everything within your power to make sure you meet the safety requirements, and then you avoid all the detention, first and foremost. On the issue of embargo cargoes, it is a little bit tricky, because when a vessel calls at port and the postal control officer comes on board and he starts checking for the various requirements and various certificates and find out probably you are not in compliance, and he detains the vessel. Now, the vessel that is, the cargo that is of concern, probably if that vessel is to call at another port, because probably you are dropping cargo at one port, okay, the ones you are dropping at the port you are, it's not much of a problem. But what's about the vessel that remain on board for the vessel to call at another port? What do you do to such cargo and such vessel? There's usually within international law, even in UNCLOS, there's a provision that they create a little room. If the safety issue identified on the vessel, it does not pose a threat to crew or safety of the vessel, that is, can the vessel sail freely to the next port until you make correction of the deficiency that you saw, yes, you can allow the vessel to sail without keeping the vessel. But if the deficiency discovered is very serious, that if you allow that vessel to sail and the ship will probably capsize or something happen to it, then of course they will not allow you to sail. Then it becomes an issue of the cargo on that vessel. It's, at the end of the day, it still boils down to who owns the ship, who is managing your ship, making sure that your ship meets all the important safety requirements that will avoid detention. On the issue of embargo countries, I'll use probably Iran as an example. If the United Nations comes up with a resolution that bans vessel calling at ports in Iran to lift crude oil, for example, the simple advice to the ship owner is avoid taking your vessel there. If you took your vessel there, you may call at some ports that you may not be arrested. But the port in U.S., for example, if you call at a port in U.S. and they discover that that vessel violated the UN resolution, you are definitely going to be detained. So when a country is embargoed, I use in accordance with United Nations resolution my advice to you is avoid that. Don't send your vessel to that port. Because you send your vessel to that port, do not call to jurisdiction of the United States of America. Definitely, you call there, the U.S. Coast Guard find out, they see your vessel trail, and find out that you call at that port or at a Bago port, they are definitely going to detain that vessel. On the issue of abandoned crew, it's a serious one. It's good that we have the Maritime Labor Convention 2006 that just came into effect in August of last year. It tries to address some issues of abandoning crew in a way such that the mining agency responsible, in short, the burden is not placed on the ship owner. They are not only limited to mining agency, because what some ship owners do, they get their vessel, the vessel is chartered out, and then the mining is also chartered out to a totally different person. When the crew run into problems and there's problem, the ship owner backs up. You cannot go to the ship owner, you don't know who to go to. Now, what MLC has does, there's a kind of certificate on mining such that the owner of the vessel signs on. So it's not an issue of when the vessel calls somewhere and is detained and then you can abandon the crew and think you run away. Within the Liberian registry, we make sure you sign that certificate. We make sure we know who the owner is, who is the person to contact in case the vessel runs into difficulty, in case the crew got problem, and we know who to revert to. For example, the issue of wages or crew is always an issue. Some vessels owners don't want to pay the crew their wages. So to address all these issues, MLC has come on stream, and I think to a certain extent is going to help. But equally, I must warn you, there are some reckless, irresponsible ship owners who they don't care. At the end of the day, probably their vessel has been in service for quite a long time. They have recouped their investment. They are even prepared to abandon the vessel, and they don't care to come, and they forget you and the crew. That happens in places like Somalia, where some crews have to stay into captivity for God knows how long. So these are all issues you have to be concerned with. The next thing I would like to, in similar line, I would like to talk on what my sister Fumi talked about. I talked about capital. She talked about what is needed is the cargo, and then the vessel will show up. Yes, basically, ship operates based on derived demand, what they call derived demand. Once there is cargo, somebody is going to bring a ship to move the cargo. Yes, that's theoretically. But in practice, she used Nigeria as an example, indigenization policy. Will you think, yes, there is crude oil existing in Nigeria. Yes, there is cargo to move in Nigeria. Nigeria has a very big market. Do you think a ship owner or a shipping yard is prepared to take a risk or high risk and send they invest their capital in such a high risk environment where today the government changes, nobody knows what is happening, the issue of insecurity, nobody knows what is happening? Do you think they will come there? So if the risk, yes, shipyard may want to engage you, but if the investment environment is too risky, then it is the government that bears the responsibility to do such a kind of investment that individual citizens and private people will not want to do. That's the reason why it's a deliberate government policy. Yes, Africans can own ship. The capital is very intensive. Ship owners may, yes, cargo may be there, they may want to come, but they are going to do all kind of risk analysis before they come out with a capital. And the chances are they will not invest their money. So that's why the government comes in. And that's why you see in places like Ethiopia. So yes, government can come in, they can intervene, give the initial seed money, give the comfort to the investor, and then you can partner. That's why we talk about public-private partnership. If government does not come in, I can tell you it will be very, very difficult for private individuals to just own ship or for private investors to just come and invest their money into shipping. Because the shipping market is a very turbulent one. It operates in peak and troughs. It's up 1 year, the next time it's 7 years down. Your vessel is sitting there. Who's the private man that prepared to tie his money down? We thank God nowadays most of the investors into shipping are financial institutions and banks, and they are not individuals. That's where government has to come in and partner. The question is, if African governments can spend so much huge money on consumables, what stopped the African government from spending huge money on capital investment? See the amount of stationaries that you consume, the amount of car repairs and maintenance you carry on. Are there Africans that are providing those services? No, so why not invest in something like shipping or bringing these things and reduce the cost to your people? That's what I thought. And finally, I'll talk about the fellow who talked about the artisanal fishermen, the little small fishermen and whatnot. Yes, it still boils down to deliberate government policy. Usually we know bigger vessels are not supposed to fish within 3 nautical miles of your coast. Within 3 nautical miles of the coast is left to the local and small fishermen. They're the ones that should do the fishing. But we all heard that our governments don't have the capacity to police our waters and oceans. So you have these big vessels. In the evening, you look on the coast, you see them, they are there fishing. Nobody can go arrest them. Nobody can do anything. So our fishermen go out, they cannot catch fish. It still boils down to the government. So the government has to take deliberate policy action in terms of Coast Guard, as we heard this morning, and security to police to make sure you go after those vessels and interdict them once they cross the limit at which they're supposed to fishing, or if they are fishing illegally. Then, of course, you talk about owning boats. It still boils down to why I say government can, yes, assist the people, set up some cooperative, get them the resources, buy the boat, help them, and eventually they pay back government money or pay back the money to some private investor. But government still has to guarantee whoever do the investment. Without that kind of initial investment from government, we are not going to succeed. Indonesia, Singapore, Korea, Japan, they all started from the government. So why should Africa be any different?
Thank you very much. I think the first issue is whether indeed oil and gas is a resource case. I think time and again we have heard that the black gold is a resource case. And indeed, I'm sure it is based on empirical evidence that we have found in some countries that have gotten oil and gas. There is normally what we refer to as the Dutch disease. And I think that is what all countries that get oil and gas and begin to exploit the resources should be looking at, that they don't fall into the trap of the Dutch disease, where you abandon your key resource areas and other areas that generate income because of the discovery or exploitation of oil and gas. As far as Ghana is concerned, I must say that we are a new kid on the block. Ghana started first oil in 2010 only. You know, if you compare it to our near neighbor Nigeria, over 50 years of exploitation of oil and gas. So naturally, what Ghana did was to tap on the knowledge of Nigeria, Norway, Canada, and others who have utilized the resource, and also learn from the pitfalls of those who have suffered the resource curse. Consequently, in developing a fiscal regime, we took cognizance of some of these. In our laws relating to the fiscal regime for hydrocarbons, particularly, I have mentioned that we have a local content law that allows 60% of various aspects of the trade to be in the hands of Ghanaians. Apart from that, the place where the oil itself is discovered, what we call the enclave, the oil enclave, there are a number of industries that ought to be set up only in those areas. And also a certain percentage of employment in terms of quotas must be for people who hail from those particular communities. So these have been taken care of. In fact, some schools that should train people are to be set up only in these areas and cannot be set up elsewhere in the country. In addition to that, we talked about the economy generally. I have my personal views, but maybe I can share them at coffee break. But generally what Ghana has done is to build what we call a heritage fund. Because of the finite nature of the resource, we've had a heritage fund which puts aside about 10% of all revenues in oil and gas in a fund that will be for future generations. And then we also have a stabilization fund so that a certain amount of money is kept to stabilize the volatilities of the pricing of oil. So all of these things have been taken into consideration as far as the industry is concerned. So the communities are deeply involved, but as I said, Ghana is a new kid on the block. It's only about 4 years old since we started exploiting oil and gas. I believe a better assessment could be made whether indeed oil has impacted our economy positively and trickled down to the ordinary people, we may be able to do that after about maybe 6-7 years into the industry. Then we will be in a position to do that. But mechanisms have been put in place such that we don't fall into some of the traps that we have known others to fall into, and to make this very important resource a curse. That is what Ghana has done. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson, for being so kind as to allow me to make a few comments. What compelled me to want to comment are basically two issues. One relates to what was raised as a specific issue, problematized as maybe an import duties and so on to support the fisheries sector. I'm saying in the absence of an industrial policy that says we want factories and manufacturing capacity of such here consciously, then we can raise import duties up to 100% because you are deliberately intervening in favor of Kenyan industry to say our fishing sector shall be supported for certain components out of Kenya. And therefore anybody who wants to participate must come and locate their factories domestically so that we can then support and all of that. So it really means that we cannot operationalize the absence of a clear industrial policy because it comes out as a problem. Whereas if behind it was a deliberate policy, one could say either way. If you want to allow imports, remove the duties. But if you are thinking that those things are produced by small and medium enterprises of other nations, supplying the core businesses in Kenya, it could mean that something is amiss completely. So I think that discussion ought to be collocated within a broader discussion. But the second issue on the fishery side, because I'm very passionate about the fishery sector because it's a very strange sector, different to any other. The fishers go out to feed themselves and their families, and therefore it's a livelihood. Each time that sector fails, the state must step in with social grants and becomes very expensive. On the other hand, it's a lucrative commercial sector, positioned differently. But in most instances, we don't have deliberate policies on how to sustain artisanal ones and how to support the commercial ones. But you can't find that discussion within the fisheries discussion. When the cluster is there, you'll have the economists in the room, you have the researchers in the room, even before deciding to buy boats. Are the boats that they have today, are they economic enough? What is the economic unit for survival out at sea for an artisanal person? Is it still the skiff that only draws about 20 Ks a day? Maybe that has become uneconomic. Maybe they need to go a little bit further up, but those boats can't get there. The answer cannot just be the replacement of the current fleet with new fleet. It has to be located within perhaps what then becomes that cluster which looks at fisheries, industrially, economically, new boats, everything, quotas, so on and so forth, and the sustainability into the future, inclusive of the coexistence of the hydrocarbon industries, deep sea, and fisheries, because in many instances, the two just don't go together. Governments tend to run with hydrocarbon industries at the expense of fisheries. We need that discussion and a balance between the two. And I'm saying the answer cannot be found outside a deeper, far-reaching discussion about how to transform and reposition the fisheries sector in such a manner that it's supported by very clear industrial policy behind it. And any other issue could be engineering, equipment, importation, and so on and so forth. In South Africa, I'll give an example. We've got a fleet of over 3,000 fishing vessels. For the last 8 years, we've been allowing importation of those vessels. They're decrepit, they don't meet our safety standards, they're not built for our waters. Fishers go out and they die because these ships are not built for the waters of South Africa. We've put a deliberate policy. No importation of fishing vessels into our country anymore. All that stock will go towards the local manufacturing capacity because these are not very big ships and therefore they can be supplied. But you need a deliberate industrial policy. The last issue I just wanted to touch on, Chair, with your indulgence. In shipping, there's nothing called banking. But in banking, there's something called shipping. When you export FOB, it's not about who raised the funds and so on. It is the cargo owner who's exporting, who says, I don't want to know. The local bank cannot negotiate with them because the policy says whoever buys my goods must decide on everything. Insurance, finance, I don't want to know. By tweaking the policy on exports CIF and imports FOB, you are literally saying cargo owners of Kenya, when you are going to export, you are going to read every line in the spreadsheet and decide how much you can pay to banking, how much you can pay to insurance, and so on and so forth. So that way, local banks can negotiate with their cargo owners. But on an export FOB, there's nobody to talk to. You can't buy a ship because the controllers of the fleet are not in your country. They're in Hamburg, they're in Vienna, they're somewhere else where you cannot find them. So we need to deal with the issue deeply of what is the deliberate position Kenya wants to take. Once that is clear, you can discuss banking, you can discuss financing, you can discuss insurance, and say, how do we make it happen? But if you start by saying, let's discuss insurance and so on and so forth, how difficult or easy it's going to be, you lose sight of exactly what is it that you are trying to achieve. And I know, Chairperson, I might have taken more time than I need to. But I'm thinking now that we keep saying the fishing grounds of Kenya are a free-for-all. But what we've discovered in South Africa is that when you don't have coastal shipping that you control as a country, you know what, when a foreign coastal vessel is out there seeing somebody fishing, people don't bring ships to fish for 2-3 hours and disappear. They stay in your waters. But the coastal vessels passing are saying, I don't want to raise this issue. I've seen that vessel. I ain't going to report to the authorities. I don't want to be part of the court case in Kenya. I'm going to look the other way and keep going. Kenya cannot afford to police every square meter of your waters via a deliberate coast guard. But when all ships under the control of Kenya that are applying their trade in the coastal waters, they get a deliberate policy mandate to report all activities at sea. All ships cannot stop at sea unless KMA allows them to. That's what the law says in Kenya. Now, it's a mix of all of these things to say the control of your waters come not only through policing, but comes through the control of the maritime domain, through knowing that everybody out there is licensed by you, operates under your policy, benefits from the resource and the domain itself, and therefore is part of the ears and eyes of a country. And that way you can even protect your own fishing services. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before the PS speaks, there are 3 points which I think we need to internalize. The first one is one of our biggest, what you call maritime weakness in the continent, is the trade to go out. So you have the imports coming in, but you don't have exports going out. And we need to deal as a continent who will generate what you call the Dubai points of Africa, so that certain exports indirectly are shipped from certain ports. So you can have even South Africa bringing some cargo inside a Dubai sitting in Mombasa, where now the ships or the people buying goods are indirectly buying from that particular location. But that's one of our biggest Africa, whatever. We had a small conference in Geneva, and the world map of trade was put on the screen, and Africa was not included. So this Nigerian friend of mine raised his hand, said that the map is wrong. Can you correct it? Then he was told it is it's to the nearest 6%. So when you round 6% of world trade, the whole of Africa gets out of the map. But that's one of the bigger things, and the reason, PS, I'm raising this is one of your vision, if you remember, in this same room, in terms of the corridor of the railway network, is to support inter-African trade. The second one is you cannot negotiate what you don't know. So there is a deliberate need for us to understand this business called shipping. The people who manage it and control it, they are far ahead of who you think you are. They draft the laws for you, they bring you a drafted law, they give you a holiday in the UK where you are made to sign what you call agreements. By the time you come back to talk, you have already finished signing the agreements on the other side. So we need to challenge ourselves the number of whiskeys we take in those international meetings. Because once in a while you corride yourself without your knowledge. So these are things that we need to be very clear. And I'm being very deliberate because trading is the only animal that makes everybody know what you should know. So if you don't know, it's not my business to help you know. And people need to understand that it is not in the ship's CV to make you know. You either know or you don't know. The third one is the disconnection between the trade fair practices. My brother from Ghana, Liberia, they have deliberately trying to bring out a silent point. What are your internal policies which defend what is called an infant industry, Bwana PS? Because if I own a ship from Norway as an example, I own a ship from Singapore as an example, I own a ship from Morocco as an example, of how much business can that ship do? And this is where now the word Kenya Maritime, Bwana PS, comes in. Communication Authority does not allow any foreign station to start broadcasting in an airwave called Kenya without Communication Authority clearance. So what is the capacity of your legal mechanism within the maritime laws of the country to assist the fair dealing of industry relationships? Because I don't think we are talking of stop. I don't think that's the right word. It's a relationship issue. It's trying to agree, I generate a profit from your zone, I will return this back to society. So that game plan of fair play should be a society-driven concept. Then when we come to what we call ROCO, and this is now to my Kenyan friends and to the donor community. When you come to the word ROCO fishing, in Schedule 4, it's a county function. So from a constitutional perspective, you must get the governors to internalize the budgets for the boats of those counties sitting in fishing areas. If you don't get it right at that level, the rest will just be storytelling. And this is the disconnection we are having because we are over-discussing. We just had a word with CS Felix, Agriculture, and he said, Muremi, we are aware of all these things. But there's the budgeting in terms of two governments. So the president was not inviting the Council of Governors chair in this conference just for the fun of it. He was being invited because substantive agriculture deliberate policy issues have to be agreed at the county government level. And we need to be clear that you cannot ask government to do what is not constitutional. So as we think the answers, we need to reposition our debate. Why do we have poverty at the highest incidence level in the counties that are next to the sea? Where is our policy disconnect? And that debate, I think this is what my friend from South Africa has tried to bring out, that how do you induce fishing industry locations? How do you allow fishing to be an industry? So that they are not waking up to just go for going. They are going through circles which are managed, circles which can be supported from government policy. But if we keep on discussing that they wake up to go, they come back in the morning, blah, 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 that's hawking. And hawking is not part of the normal policy development. So we need to rethink how do we organize these people who fish into substantive industry corridors And that's the circle thinking without losing sight that circles are also under county government in Schedule 4. So how do we assist these fellows called the governors to reposition the policy of making these industries called fishing in their areas proactive industries? And then as a nation, how do we reposition, and I don't know who brought the issue of, you brought in real property as part of the cluster, I think it was South Africa. How do you reposition part of your best houses to be part of those seafront areas so that part of the local fishing is bought by these people owning the rich homes at a price which is higher than the current problem that we are having, that if tourism goes down, even the fishing prices also goes down. So, Bwana Pierce, I just thought I should comment that to allow you to answer the balance of the question. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and thank you very much the presenters and those who have made very, very important interventions. I want to say this, that as we came to work on this particular conference, our idea is a quantum leap into commercialization, industrial growth, and development. And therefore, we are aiming at ensuring that what we agree on in our policy direction will result in a massive change in our economic and social development. There was one comment that was made by Professor, lady across on my left, and she talked about collaboration. As we develop our policy, integrated policy, we will have to collaborate with industry, with trade, with agriculture, with land use. All of those issues must be discussed and discussed in depth so that we're very clear about the impact we want to create. The resolve of the government on this particular matter cannot be underestimated. His Excellency the President has in fact made certain directives in his communication today. The first one was on education, on capacity building. And as we move forward, one of the issues that I've even talked about with the Director General is about the development of a fund that can be developed within this budgeting period, because our budgeting period starts from 1st July. We are in the budgeting period at the moment, so that our public universities who are beginning to provide this training can tap into this fund for support. It's critical so that we can create an incentive for our public universities to tap in to a fund to be able to support them in developing the necessary training capacity that we require. But we will also expect those public universities to produce quality and quantity, because if we are going to commercialize, if we are going to develop and develop fast, we need the people and we need them quickly. I think the issue of fisheries and the necessary incentives has been talked about. But again, it should be around commercialization. It should be around volume. It should be around ensuring that we convert our smaller fishermen into major fishermen. Not, that's not where we're going. So the fiscal regime that we are talking about needs to be a regime that gets people to move at a very, very high level. The comments on ship ownership, especially from the African Ship Owners Association, very, very encouraging. The issue here is, have we got the political will? And I can confirm we do. And some of the actions we'll be taking for Kenya National Shipping Line in terms of ensuring that certain cargo from government moves in the direction that we want it to move, so that we can actually develop our shipbuilding and ship ownership environment will be some of the things that we will ensure are in this policy. So I won't go into all because I think all of them have been talked about. But I would like to encourage, especially the business community that is here, on the issues of tax through the Kenya Private Sector Alliance. Some of those issues on equipment and all of that, can we put them through KEPSA as an urgent action so that then we can have those tax proposals available so that during the budgeting process this year, in July, there should be some positive effect from this particular session that we've had. So, in conclusion, I would like to say that that room that you're talking about in the Ministry of Transport will be available. The key will be provided to my brother here. And really, very, very seriously, we will be developing this policy and we will be implementing it very, very shortly. But more importantly, I've actually said that this policy will become a sessional paper of our parliament so that it is fully adopted, so that then anyone trying to deviate can get the necessary consequences thereof, so that we can ensure that in future budgets, and I think somebody talked about individuals, personalities, and whether they'll be there. That is why I'm saying I don't know whether I'll be there tomorrow. But what I'm saying is, can we get this thing institutionalized properly so that the issues of safety, security, and the business aspects around maritime business and the harnessing of those benefits are properly institutionalized within our government system. So I thank you very, very much for your contributions today. We need you tomorrow. Please come back. Please be with us and make that contribution that will make Kenya's maritime policy something that we can all say we are proud of, that you have contributed to, and maybe other countries can learn from. Thank you very much, and I wish you a good evening. Thank you.
We've come to the close of today's deliberations, and I hope you have enjoyed yourselves. Have you? Has it jogged your minds? You look a little tired. Are you tired? Just stand up on your feet, and I'm sure now we are just closing out. Turn around and wave to the people at the back, the ones seated behind you. Both hands. Yes, and then wave to the ones in the front. I think you have been seated for such a long time. I will not ask you to dance because the dinner dance is almost here with us. I will instead invite you to a gala dinner tonight in the same venue where we had lunch here at KICC. We were supposed to convene for that dinner at 6:45. Now, looking at our watches now, what time is it? 6:45. I have been told that the people who are attending this conference do not take baths, they freshen up. So 45 minutes enough for you to freshen up and show up for dinner? 7 o'clock? 7 o'clock. So we converge again at the venue where we had lunch at 7 o'clock. Tomorrow morning, we meet here again it will be safe to come in at 10 to 9, because at exactly 9 o'clock, we will kick off with the sessions, and we will promise that we will keep time tomorrow. So please make sure you are here at 9 o'clock. Thank you very much, and see you later in the evening. Can you clap for the speakers? All the speakers. Thank you very much. Thank you.